Hey, and welcome to this new episode of Movie Howl. I am Ryan, Joe is Joe, and most importantly, you are you. This time we're talking about a newer movie than we've discussed before, The New Mutants.
Yeah, this was I thought it wasn't as bad as I expected it to be. I'll first say that about it. I know with a lot of the delays and the things, how long it took to actually come out, and I know that can be that whole process that's Hollywood's been going through now. Can sometimes spell disaster for some of these movies, but considering I think it's in the realm of like a Buffy the Vampire Slayer, or the WB shows
CW
for young adults. I mean, I knew that's what we were going to get, and I didn't hate it. I know what I hate. I didn't hate this.
I didn't know anything about it coming in. I knew it was X-Men related. I knew it had been delayed, and I knew that it had some negative reviews online already. But this movie is pretty recent. It was, when I looked it up on IMDb, it was showing a release date of 8/28/2020. And I actually didn't look anything about it up until after. I knew that I recognized some of the actors. It's funny that you bring up, like a Buffy the Vampire Slayer, WB, CW type thing. Because Blue Hunt, the one who played Danny, is from a CW show called The Originals.
Oh, yeah.
I've never seen it. I've never watched it myself. I think I might have seen my girlfriend watching it.
Got ya.
Because she looked vaguely familiar to me. I think The Originals is about vampires. But it seems like every show on the CW is about vampires to me, because I don't watch any of them. They all kind of
probably
have
at least 50% of them.
Yeah, it's like how all the Arrowverse shows kind of have the same feel to them. A lot of these shows, have a very similar feel. Although I guess Arrowverse is CW, isn't it?
It is.
So it's vampires and superheroes.
So basically, yes. As far as yes.
But yeah, I had some
vampire superheroes and Dawson's Creek.
I had some high expectations because I saw Maisie Williams. Again, didn't know anything about it. I just saw when it started. I recognized Maisie Williams from Game of Thrones as Rain.
Right.
Anya Taylor-Joy from Split. I don't know if you remember her in that or if you watched that movie.
I've seen Split. I have not seen the follow-up to that.
Neither have I. But I did recognize her from Split. She was the girl who was kidnapped and the one who survived everything, where at the end he says that she's pure and lets her go.
Yeah, I didn't recognize her. I did not realize that was her until you just said something now.
Yeah, I recognized her pretty quick because she has a very unique look. There's something with the way, I don't know, her eyes are set or something that just, she stands out a little bit. I think she's in maybe Queen's Gambit or something like that. I know I've seen her in a trailer for something else new, and I think it's a Netflix thing. But yeah, she stands out to me. I recognize her right away. And also Charlie Heaton, who's from Stranger Things, who plays Sam Guthrie. I should point out that Anya Taylor-Joy played Ilyana Rasputin, which is a great last name. When I saw that, I thought it was a joke. I thought I must have read it wrong because it pops up on the screen when you're seeing the computer's sort of Terminator vision. But it's Rasputin.
It is indeed. Yeah, this was how do I want to put this? This movie had, it tried to introduce you to these characters, give you a little idea of what their powers are, that kind of thing, throughout the course of the entire movie. I mean, it's not like they just did it all right up front. Because of one thing or another, all of these young adults, basically children, like realistically as far as maturity level goes, they're in this hospital. I don't know if you can hear me using air quotes over the microphone, but yeah, this hospital thing with one single doctor throughout all of it. Like they're interacting with each other and this one doctor. That's basically this entire movie.
Yeah, a hospital with 4 patients? No, 5 patients.
Yeah, when Danny shows up too, yes.
Yeah, because there was Roberto, which I didn't recognize him from anything, so I didn't really look him up.
Yeah, 2 guys, 2 girls are in the hospital already when Danny is brought in after a harrowing event that happens, and apparently she comes to find out she is an American Indian, and her entire tribe has been annihilated.
Yeah, it had very Last of Us vibes for me, if you played that. Yeah, it was a lot like the scene of the father in that game, scooping his daughter up and trying to get her out because things are, shit's hitting the fan.
Okay, I can see that.
I think it started out well. I came into it with very low expectations. I expected it to be really bad the whole time. And I'm not a huge X-Men fan. I haven't seen all the movies. Like I said, I knew this was vaguely related to it. I had seen the first 2 X-Men. I think I skipped the third. I saw Origins.
I'm sorry.
I saw Logan, which was fantastic.
It's fantastic.
I saw Days of Future Past. I saw Apocalypse. I did not see Dark Phoenix, I think it was called, because that was another one where I just heard it was terrible.
That's the latest one.
Yeah, this one I wanted to give a chance because I think it's the last one before Disney takes over the rights.
Ah, okay.
So, I mean, and I wanted to like it. And I came into it, like I said, I'd only seen some very vaguely negative things, that this was like kind of a last fart of the old X-Men franchise before it got taken over. But in general, I was pleasantly surprised by it.
Yeah, this I have seen, except for Dark Phoenix, except for the very latest one. I have seen all of them. I was a big X-Men fan of the comics.
Yeah.
When I was a kid,
I had the comics. I think we talked about this before. We both had trading cards. I had binders full of the trading cards back in the early 90s. And I can name all the characters, at least the ones that existed then.
Yeah. Like, I remember it was only... X-Men was one of the only comics I actually read as a kid. I didn't read Captain America. I didn't read Spider-Man. I read some Punisher, and I read some Wolverine, because Wolverine came off of the X-Men, but X-Men was easily one of my favorite growing up.
You didn't read the fantastic New Kids on the Block comics?
I think I missed those. I must have just glanced over them on the shelf. I don't know if my eye must not have been drawn to the art.
I'd say I let you borrow some, but I think mine got ruined from sitting under the stairs for 25 years.
Oh no, that's so sad. I'm so disappointed now, man. What the hell? So this movie, I felt, is unlike a lot of when you have movies that are of a group of superheroes that you're trying to set all of them up in a single movie, like the original X-Men did, Fantastic Four has done, Guardians of the Galaxy, that you get to know each one of these characters kind of separately, and you kind of learn what they're about, what they can do. This was not that movie. All of them were just kind of thrown in together into the mix in this hospital. You have this doctor, Dr. Reyes, who's trying to... the idea behind it is that she's trying to teach them how to control their powers. Same as you would have in, Dr. Xavier's school, except in his school, you notice that there aren't automatic locks on all the doors that are voice activated as you walk through.
Yeah, and there's no solitary confinement as punishment if you do lose control of your powers or get into an argument with somebody or generally act disobedient.
Yeah, I don't remember Charles Xavier ever doing that. Except maybe in someone's mind, he might solitary confinement in your mind for a while.
Yeah, it's very different from Wolverine waking up in the academy in the first movie. Her waking up handcuffed to a bed.
Right? Yeah, it really it throws you into it. Getting all of these kids together, the first scene of them all together as they're in an AA meeting style, uh, get together. They're all sitting on chairs, doctors, trying to be in charge of it all, getting people to, well, let's talk about the first time that you know, that you used your powers and what happened, and can we go ahead and tell that story? And so a couple of them, kind of tell their stories. I think, what's her name? Maisie Williams' character.
Rain Sinclair. She's the first to share her story.
Yeah, she shares her story first. It takes a while before you find out exactly what happened to Danny, the one who just got brought in. They kind of set up each one of these characters, I thought, in an okay manner. It did have some of that. I mean, it's a young adult movie, and so it's going to have some of the tropes that you would expect in a movie like that. A kind of cocky asshole jock character,
Mm-hmm.
uh, a pretty girl who, in this case, ended up, they were trying to portray her more as psycho, as kind of crazy,
Yeah.
than
Yeah.
just like a preppy, I'm in charge of everything, even though that's the vibe you got from her character. Uh,
She treated Danny the way one of the mean girls would have treated her.
yeah, that it definitely had that feel to it. The other guy who was there, this working class guy, you see him and he's got like a cast on one wrist. He's got some bumps and bruises, like something has happened recently. It's it did an okay job of setting that up. But one of the things I thought early in this movie, as I'm watching it, I realized, well, Maisie Williams is probably going to carry this movie. Um, but all of these young actors are really going to have to do a good job, especially because I didn't know in the beginning of the movie that basically the only characters we deal with throughout the entire thing are the five kids, and this doctor. There's a few other little characters, her dad, some flashback stuff, but for the most part, that's it. And so these kids, these young actors, are going to have to do a really good job to keep us invested and interested in this movie. And with a few minor nitpicks that I would say, I thought they all did a fairly decent job of that.
Yeah, I would agree, especially with the way they were introduced. When they were going through that scene where they're all sitting in the circle, I was thinking of the beginning of Suicide Squad. How you're very quickly introduced to all these characters through... I'm trying to figure out how to put it. You're introduced to all the characters through a really poorly implemented series of montages and flashbacks and narration, where you're told something about a character and then shown them doing it, but it's really quick. It is without any other context. It's without seeing them interacting with anybody else that's related to that story. That's kind of the context thing I already said, but in this one, you're getting to know all of them through the way they're behaving with each other in the story. It's a much more natural way. You're seeing it all through the perspective of the characters that you're following, instead of being given this God mode view where you get to see the past or moments taken out of the past from these other characters, if that makes sense.
They do. They I thought had a very interesting way to show us these things, this history of these other characters using one of the characters. They each have at least, okay, so three of them at the school before Danny gets there have pretty, you would call them basic powers. Things that you can look at and say, "Oh, I know it. I get it. I know what they do." Another one of them, her powers a little more like what can you do? Can you teleport? Can you wait? You have a metal arm with a sword? Like what's going on?
That was something that I was thinking
but
about too, and I was complaining about to my girlfriend while we're watching this. Like, what is with that particular power? It's Ilya's power, or
yes,
that she, because Rain. So I guess from here we're gonna have to get into kind of spoilerish territory.
What they can do, sure.
Yeah, what they can do, but we're also probably gonna get into the characters that come in later and how it's kind of resolved. But I would say at this point, and maybe we should leave this as just a point where people can leave off if they want to go watch it. I would say probably watch it and then come back and see what you think, because I think you and I have slightly different opinions, and I don't want to spoil anything for anybody who's going to enjoy it maybe more than I did.
Okay, it's fair.
I thought that power that Ilya had was very weird compared to like Rain, who could transform into a wolf and kind of go in like a halfway, half in, half out kind of werewolf mode, where she had traits of both. Roberto was basically Johnny Storm from the Fantastic Four.
Yes.
What was Charlie's thing? He could blast off. He had some almost Gambit-like way of harnessing kinetic energy. He could launch himself. He could, accelerate his arm faster to throw objects faster. It's Gambit's thing, but if Gambit infused his body with the energy to do the thing instead of infusing the object to do the thing. Does that make sense?
It is. I believe that character's name is Cannonball. They mentioned it one time as he was doing his training, again with these air quotes, thing that it showed him doing, and you kind of got an idea of his power.
Where he tethered himself to that giant concrete block and then did the human tetherball act?
Yeah, it just spun around. And at first you think, well, this is, okay, I get it. That's what he can do. But it ended up being a little bit more complex than that, and I liked that they didn't just show you everything at one time. They just introduced it gradually and surprised me with a couple of things later on in the movie that I liked. I thought that was well done by them.
Then when you get to Ilya's power, it's so specific, and it's so strange to me. I mean, I know that I'm saying it's strange, and this is an X-Men thing, and they have a lot of strange abilities. But her power is teleportation in limited capacities, because she can do it, but she can't escape her room when she's locked in there. I don't know if that's because of Dr. Reyes or what. She can teleport in a limited capacity. She can generate basically like armor, like a knight might have, almost like the power suits from the Wolfenstein games.
Yeah,
on her right arm specifically. Yes. She can also will a sword into existence that can have a lightsaber type energy envelope around it. And she can take her little sock puppet dragon Lockheed and turn it into a real life Spyro that can fly around and act on its own and fight with her.
Now, besides Cannonball, who we mentioned, she called her little dragon thing that you end up seeing later in the movie that she's not just a crazy person with a sock puppet, that's actually how that manifests. I recognize that name from, I'd say, some of the comic books and more likely the cards that we collected, because I would go through those, look at everything. I cannot, for the life of me, nor did I take the time to look it up, but I don't remember any of the names of any of the other characters, what their actual, superhero names would be. Yeah.
Yeah, and I didn't want to look those up either because I don't want to be influenced by that. I don't want to be reminded of something I read 20 years ago and have it color my perception. Kind of the way, one of our mutual friends and I are both watching The Mandalorian, and we're having very different experiences because I recognize all these characters being introduced from the Clone Wars and some of the extended universe stuff, and she doesn't.
Okay.
So we experience it in a slightly different way. Things that are really like, oh, it's so cool to see this person live action. She's like, oh, looks like another Star Wars character. Interesting. You know? So I don't want to be all excited about seeing somebody that I would have known from the comics. I'm kind of trying to judge this just as what it is. So I also don't know if this ties into another movie. I don't know if there was something in Dark Phoenix that hinted that this was coming.
Oh, yeah. Since I haven't seen that, neither one of us have. No way to tell if that's the case. My guess would be not. This really feels like its own standalone thing. I know Marvel is notorious for Easter eggs from one movie to another kind of thing, but I think the X-Men franchise is far enough removed at this point that probably wasn't the case.
Yeah, it did have the in association with Marvel thing. So maybe it's an origin movie that they're setting up. Maybe they're not going to have the OG X-Men join the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but maybe it's these guys.
Maybe.
I don't really know.
We'll have to see what well, it's really what it comes down to is what is going to make them the most money, and that's what they'll choose. Or what they think will make them the most money.
Yeah.
Which is sad to think that that's how the people who are in charge of having these movies made make decisions. But let's be honest, that's the point of making these movies. I mean, you want them to be fun and you want people to enjoy them for sure. A lot of people who put work into these movies, they want you to enjoy it, but it's not the reasons they get made.
Yeah, and I think along those same lines, there's a lot of gravity to what these movie studios decide to do with characters that are so ingrained in our culture at this point. Characters that have been around, like Batman since the 30s. Batman and Superman both, I believe.
Like yeah, they've been
30s,
around for a
40s.
long time.
Yeah, Spider-Man since I think around the 60s, and Iron Man as well. I mean, some of these characters have been around so long, and people are so invested in them, and they're invested in their particular version. And if you make a movie like Scent of a Woman or something like that, and it flops, nobody cares because it's not about a character that they've been invested in for so long.
Got ya.
But when you make an X-Men movie or an Iron Man, well, I actually do think that's why Marvel started with kind of the lower tier heroes, because that's what Iron Man was before the movies.
Absolutely.
He was not super popular, so they took a risk. Same with the Arrowverse. Green Arrow wasn't that popular. They took a risk by bringing him. Like, they specifically did not want to try to use Batman or Superman or any of the really high profile ones because they don't want to taint that or screw that up or piss anybody off. But yeah, I guess I should probably end my soapbox rant. But I do think, yeah, it's one of these things where people get so much more worked up when decisions are made about characters that they feel like they have some kind of ownership over, or that they feel is important to maybe their identity or their past, or they look up to that character or whatever.
Yeah, I get that. That, it makes sense. People do feel, and I mean, they have nothing to do with the creation of it, the upkeep of a character, or how the character's storyline goes, but they do. They feel a personal connection and ownership, as you will, to some of these characters. And it's an interesting look into, the human psyche and how we view our heroes, people we put on pedestals for whatever reason, whether it's a comic book character, a sports character, a character that an actor portrays in a movie, or even the actor themselves who's in the movie, putting these people up on pedestals for whatever reason. It's, we're just people. Sports guy can, he can run really fast and shoot a ball really well, but he's just another human being, same as, you or I.
So, back to the movie. I really liked it for probably the first 2/3 of it, maybe 3/4 of it. It was a really good kind of slow burn. You know what it was kind of like? It just now occurred to me. It's kind of like The Breakfast Club, but with superheroes.
Okay, I see that. Absolutely, very limited number of characters. You're dealing specifically with them interacting with each other. That makes sense.
In a very limited scope too. It has high stakes for the people involved, and it feels important. There was no point at which this felt less important than any other superhero movie I had seen. But when you think about it, everything took place on this abandoned hospital complex grounds.
Yep. Now, one of the things we haven't talked about yet is how this doctor is trying to stay in control of 5 mutants with these special abilities. And at one point, she is talking to Dr. Reyes is talking to Danny about people and mutants and we want to keep you safe, we want to keep us safe. And so at one point she has hinted at the fact that she's a human by saying this. The issue I took with that is the scene, like right before that happened, Ileana's character and Danny, they kind of get into it in the rec room, and Dr. Reyes has to come in and put up a force field to save Danny from getting chopped in half by this giant laser sword. Mm-hmm. And so she refers to herself as a human, but I'm thinking, as the audience watching this, I just watched her do some power shit. Like, how is this? That doesn't make sense. So that was one of the things that bugged me a little bit. And there weren't a lot of them. A couple of little teenage type movie things that would happen. There was a moment when stuff was really going down. There was some serious shit happening, and all of a sudden, Ileana starts fighting back against what's happening, and what's Roberto? He's like, oh, that was so hot. Like, oh my god, yeah. Like it didn't feel right for what has just been going on. I'm sorry, that's not what he's going to be concerned with at this moment. That was one of those, we have to throw this line in because that's his character, and that was disappointing. But a lot of the things that happened, that are brought about by Danny's power. She has this psychic ability that will allow her to make whoever it is that she does this to, they will have to deal with their worst fear. Whatever your worst fear is, you have to deal with a physical manifestation of that, and it shows you that in stages. It doesn't just happen all at one time. As you said, slow burn, which I agree. I like that a lot about this. I don't need action in order to keep me invested in your movie. I need some good characters, a good plot, like some interesting things that happen that make me actually care. There's a little bit of a teenage love story in it.
Yeah, which is alluded to early on in the movie, because you mentioned this feels like Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I don't know if you noticed, there are 2 times where you can see them watching TV. Both times they're watching Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Yeah, and the first time you see it, it's actually the scene where, if I'm remembering right, after, the only other time I've watched the show is when it was on air originally, but I believe it's the first time Willow and Tara kiss.
No, I never watched it. I have no idea.
Yeah, I saw that scene, and my girlfriend went, oh, I wonder if that means these 2 are going to get together at some point. Like, I wonder if they're foreshadowing. And turns out,
yes, they were. They absolutely were. Which, and it didn't feel forced. It just felt like a natural progression of what I was watching. I was like, okay, I don't know as far as comic book goes. People who listen, if you know the New Mutants comic better than we do, you could always, add it in the comments kind of thing. Let us know what.
Actually, we do have an email address now and
nice.
a Twitter, which I'll plug at the end. So yeah, you can let us know if we've screwed this up or if I've forgotten X-Men movies, or just tell us that you do or don't like this. Be nice. We're fragile.
I mean, some are more fragile than others. But it's because we don't know the comics or anything. I don't know if this was Hollywood adding that in because they thought it was necessary, or if it's just how that story goes. But as far as me watching it, it just felt organic. I was totally fine with it. Didn't bother me in any way, shape, or form. I thought it was perfectly fine with the movie.
It also makes it seem a lot more natural when Rain goes to save Danny towards the end of the movie. And when she's the one kind of guarding her and dragging her around as she's still unconscious from what had happened to her, it makes you feel more invested in it. Or from my perspective, it did.
Yeah, I thought it did a good job of that. There was one thing in this movie that I had to bring up. Rain's character, part of her background deals with the church. I don't want to go into it spoiler-wise a whole bunch, but deals with the church, and I understand that each one, that with her particular background, and that's probably how it was in the comics. I don't know any different, but it felt to me like another time that Hollywood is taking the opportunity to vilify the church. And I'm not super religious. I don't necessarily go to church. I was raised going to church. I was raised Catholic. But so this isn't coming out of I'm super religious and it really bothered me or anything like that. But I see it a lot. And it's very easy to vilify the church. And it's one of those things that bothers me. Like I felt like it almost didn't make sense with the doctor at one point is discussing something with Danny, and she's discussing what has just happened. And do you know what a mutant is? And she kind of, nodded. And this was a girl who lived on an Indian reservation. So you figure that's a little more removed from the normal city setting where you might learn about a lot of stuff like mutants and things like that. But obviously with the world that the X-Men has built, the universe of mutants, that's a thing. That's a thing that humans have to deal with. And so what happens to Rain, it really made me not understand why they went that direction. As I said, it's probably part of the comic. Maybe that's just exactly what happened in the comic, and so they were staying true to it. But it made me feel like it was just another example of Hollywood trying to vilify, and they're not vilifying, Jews or Muslims or any other. It's the Christian religion, and it's what Hollywood a lot, I think, does this with. And so that was one of the things that bothered me, because mostly in the fact that it didn't make sense. That if you went to a religious figure and said, hey, there's this thing going on with me, I think something is wrong with me, the reaction that took place after that didn't make sense to me. I don't think that's the reaction you would have in 2020, that your religious leader would do what happened in this movie. That didn't make sense to me.
See, it did make sense to me. It made a lot more sense to me than it just being some normal random person off the street doing it. Because in the context of religion, like you're saying, most people would be like, oh, this is some kind of mutant. Where a religious figure might have been like, oh, this is a demon. This is something bad. We've read about this. This looks like a werewolf or something like that, From that perspective, that made sense to me. I didn't really think about it from, there being an understanding. I just figured it was not so much targeted at religion, but more targeted to, this is one particular bad actor who was really invested in his own particular ideology and allowed it to, I don't know, just let him get.
And I get himself. It, like in every profession, doesn't matter what it is. I've said this for a long time. in police, in hospitals, and in everywhere. You've worked with people. Some of the coworkers you have are good, and some of the coworkers you have are shit. And some people are just not good people. Doesn't
Mm-hmm.
you can't always make that uh you can't keep that out of certain areas. Like, we don't want there to be any bad cops. Obviously, they do what they can to weed out the people who they think could potentially be bad cops, but that doesn't mean it doesn't happen, because it happens everywhere. So yeah, I get that. And I understood. And the way they portrayed it in the movie, though, I just, in my mind, 2020, you go to whoever your religious leader is and you talk about, I'm having these issues. The way that they portrayed that happening, that really seemed like something that would happen in like the 1800s, not in the 2000s.
Okay. Yeah, I can understand that. For me, where it went wrong was, so we're getting deep into spoiler territory here.
Yeah.
Let me actually say where I really liked it. Like we were talking about, it's a slow burn. You start to see Danny's powers manifest. People start having these interactions where, they're starting to see things momentarily or have strange experiences just here and there, and they don't quite know what's going on, and it's building up this suspense. If you look it up on IMDb, it's listed as, I think, a horror or thriller or something like that.
Yeah,
As
there were
one of its
definitely
genres.
elements of that in this movie. I thought that was an okay usage of that for a comic book movie. It was nice, kind of like Ant-Man wasn't as much a superhero movie as it was a heist movie. It just
Mm-hmm.
had superhero elements to it. This, they try to make a thriller, kind of a horror-esque, not super horror movie, but horror-esque, and it was a good job of that.
Yeah. And where it got really good for me, now whether the power makes sense or not, I don't know, because it's not just you who experiences your own worst memory or fear or whatever, it's everybody around you.
Yeah.
It is a physical manifestation that everybody can see. So the worst ones, the one where it got really, horror movie-ish, was where you're seeing Ilya or Illy. I keep calling her that because that's what Roberto was calling her. But Ilyana was abused as a child, and she has these monstrous versions of her abusers in her head that wear these masks, and they're elongated. They're very grotesque.
Yeah.
And
they're
those
not
start
great to
to
look
appear. She knows they're coming, and she opens the door to her room, and one of them's in there and turns around, and it's got this like horrific face. I expected it to be funny, because a lot of the time when they go for something really terrifying and it's CG, it kind of makes me laugh. These are like, when I saw it, I was like, oh, all right, this is for me. This is pretty good.
Yeah, it was well done.
There's just more and more of them that show up. They just keep coming. They're able to kind of fight them off, but more of them come. And I thought the comedy, what little comedy there was done really well. Particularly where Illy teleports out and leaves Sam behind, and he's just like, come on. It wasn't one of the over the top, like, I'm throwing this in your face lines that you get in, it wasn't like a Marvel joke.
Yeah.
Where they're like, boom, here's this thing. Get it? And it kind of, it's like they stopped the movie to do it. This made sense in the situation. It was very funny.
Yeah.
Um,
those creatures that you're talking about?
Yeah.
They were played by Marilyn Manson. I'm assuming by your stunned silence that you didn't know that.
I did not know that. Are you being serious?
No, I'm being 100% serious. IMDb, Marilyn Manson played those creatures.
Wow. That adds a whole other level to it.
I kind of thought that myself when I read that. Was like, what? Really? Okay. As if they weren't creepy enough already. Because that is a creepy dude.
It's the perfect time of year for something like that, because my favorite Christmas song is that mashup of The Beautiful People with All I Want for Christmas that I think I had you listen to. But anyway, I really like those creatures. I really like how they're trying to deal with them. I like that they're kind of figuring out that this isn't what they thought it was after Rain tries to save Danny when Reyes is tasked with killing her because she's too dangerous. You know, they get into the office, they find their files, they realize that they are not at a place that's prepping them to join the X-Men. They are not where they think they are. They're going to be used as weapons.
For the Essex Corporation.
Yeah.
Which if I know my comic book history a little bit, when it's only a little bit, the Essex Corporation is run by a character in the X-Men universe called Mr. Sinister, who's, from what I know, is actually a very cool character, and it could be really neat to see him on screen at some point. So we'll just have to see how that goes.
Maybe that's the thing that they're setting up for the MCU.
Maybe that. I mean,
cool.
Would be very cool if done correctly. We'll have to see.
Yeah. True. And they may subvert our expectations like they did with Mysterio. Well, kind of.
Kind of, yeah.
I mean, I think that might have been in association with Marvel movie rather than directly Marvel anyway. But yeah, anyway. So where it really went off the rails, though, was when they finally confront Reyes, who's bleeding out and still keeping them trapped. She still has her force fields up, which...
Yeah.
Just a small gripe. It's something that I didn't quite understand about the powers. Most of the X-Men, when they are knocked out or asleep or whatever, their powers don't do anything.
Absolutely.
Unless it's a physical thing, like I can thrash around in my sleep. You know, I've woken up with bruises on my arm because I, rolled over and smacked my arm against the nightstand. That's a thing. If your power is a physical thing, who knows? Rain might turn into a wolf in her sleep. But
right.
Jean Grey doesn't use her powers in her sleep, as far as I'm aware. Most characters who can affect the environment through their will and not just like a physical movement that could be a twitch or something, their stuff stops when they're out. So I'm not sure.
I think a lot of it...
Go on.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is exactly that way. I do believe in one of the X-Men movies that they made. They show Jean Grey, and it might have been the previews for Dark Phoenix, I don't know, but they show her sleeping, and through her sleeping, she's causing shit to happen because of nightmares, things like that are going on. So I think there is precedent for that. But with Reyes, I know exactly what you're talking about. Her particular power, using these force fields, like she puts up this force field over the entire ground. Yeah. Like one of the early scenes, Danny goes running away and she runs smack into a force field. And so, in order for this character to constantly have that going, that's a high level of training to be able to do that.
Yeah, and it's always active.
Always active.
Whatever. She's drugged. Ileana drugs her, puts something in her tea to knock her out so they can kind of have a little party in the hospital. And the force fields are still up.
Right, but what I didn't understand about that was it wasn't like they were knocking her out so that they could get away. To like just have a party and hang out and have a good time. Yeah, why wouldn't that be just allowed in general?
Yeah. It's kind of like kids being kids, but it's also one of those things where it's like, if this was the X-Men, you probably wouldn't need to do that.
Right. Like, the doctor tries to make it seem like this isn't a terrible place, but she would put stuff on lockdown if they sneezed wrong. Like, all right, lockdown. Solitary. Oh, shit. Okay.
But at the same time, they do seem to have a pretty... a wide range of things they're able to do. They're able to kind of go wherever they want in the facility. In particular, Sam and Roberto are seen a lot hanging out. Even when the girls are in their rooms or wherever they're supposed to be, they're kind of hanging out. They're doing dishes, they're doing laundry, they're just sitting around chatting.
Yeah.
But yeah, where they lose me with this is when they find Reyes, and even in her weakened state, she still subdues all of them right away with her force fields. And somehow, her force field knocks out Danny and summons the bear. That was her fear, the thing that she was afraid of. And spoilers, so again, stop if you don't want to ruin this experience for yourself. But the bear is the thing that destroyed her reservation.
Absolutely. Now, when we say her fear, we're saying Danny's fear is the bear, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, my first thought was that was what Dr. Reyes was afraid of. But she was just kind of caught in the line of fire of that bear.
Yeah, bear showed up. She was the first thing there. Bear's like, I'm having it. And then he turned the rest of them. And yeah, so just again, this is another thing, Danny's power, totally active, seems to be autonomous. It is doing its thing. It's like a defensive mechanism, kind of. Like, it's when the more vulnerable she is, when she's asleep, it's active. When she's drugged and about to be put down by Reyes, it's really active. That's when it gets the most active. So it seems like that power activates and does its thing without any intention from her.
Yeah, I thought that as well. I agree with that.
But yeah, this is the point at which it loses me, because it kind of turns into a Goosebumps movie.
You didn't like the big bear?
I did not really like the big bear. I did not really enjoy the fight. Like, I kind of did at first, because Illy is really cool, jumping around and using her mutant lightsaber thing, and doing her Nightcrawler deal and kind of teleporting places, and little Spyro the Dragon flying around and shooting fire at the thing. But they keep throwing out these quippy lines that would have been right at home in, one of the Batman, like Batman and Robin, the movie that brought us the Batman credit card and stuff like that. Like, these lines fit that type of movie.
Okay, I get
where
that.
She shows up and she's like calling out to the demon bear. She's like, there's no place to run. She's just throwing out these superhero lines and doing these poses. And it's like, oh, you were doing so good. You failed to hit all of these little cliches so many times, and then they just walked right into it.
I guess they kind of leaned pretty hard into it towards the end of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't hate the bear. I liked the opportunity for them to. I was afraid it was going to just devolve into when it was Ilya's monsters, that they were just going to be, oh, this is the anonymous, unnamed group of bad guys that you have to kill. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't that. It ended up turning it transformed into something else. It showed us what actually annihilated Danny's reservation. And then everybody got to kind of take a turn using their powers to help try and give Danny enough time to wake up to take control of what was going on, which still don't feel like at the end of the movie she had no more control over her powers than she did in the beginning of the movie. So I don't feel like there was any growth there as far as mutant capabilities are concerned with her character.
Even when it comes to her character's development, I don't think there was much going on with her. Everybody else kind of came to terms a little bit with the things that happened to them. Illy was freaking out about those creatures, and she goes to her happy place and kind of calms down and comes back and is able to fight them. Rain has to face that Reverend again. Sam has to face his fear. Everybody has to face their fears, and they have to kind of at least a little bit come to terms with it, and then they have to build up the courage to fight the giant bear monster that Danny has accidentally brought into existence.
Yeah,
and it
unleashed again.
Yeah, and it does a good job of establishing them as a new superhero team. Now that I didn't think about it in that way when I was watching it. This is like the first time they're getting together. Sam's trying to use his power to fight. Illy knows how to use her power to fight, but she hasn't fought something like this, and now she's kind of learning to. Same with Roberto. He's afraid of his powers. He's afraid of hurting people. He's afraid of hurting himself. There's a point where they find him after one of these incidents where Danny's powers have run wild, where he's just on fire in the room where the pool is. And Reyes kind of does the same thing to him that you would do to a spider you found on your toilet bowl. And she just kind of pushes him in, just gives him a little shove, and knocks him in the pool to put him out.
Yeah. Yeah, I asked my girlfriend, she's sitting there watching it with me, and I asked her, what if they weren't in the room where the pool was? The hell does she do then? Yeah. But obviously, you end up learning later, she just clamped him down with a force field because she's obviously a high-level mutant herself. So that's how that would have gone. But at the point of seeing that, you don't actually know for sure that yet. So she just knocks him into the water, and I'm like, man, if there was no pool here, I don't know what this chick was going to do.
Yeah.
I felt at one point that she was woefully inadequate for the job which she was trying to do. Like one person trying to be in charge of and control 5 young, can't control their power mutants. That seems like a tall order for just a human.
Yeah, the first time you see her use those force fields, it's like, that makes a lot of sense. You choose the one person who's... the whole... Control over anybody is really control over their mobility, right? That's what jail is. Not allowing you to move freely or communicate freely. And that's her power, is to, boom, lock you down. You're a bug, she puts a cup over you. Simple as that. Yeah. And it's a great power to have for basically a jailer. But I would say another gripe, and I don't know if this is something that other reviews have brought up because I haven't watched or read any of them, but I don't understand if there are limits to Danny's power, or if that's why she's so dangerous. Because she could continue to spawn those smiling figures. There's no seeming physical penalty. It doesn't exhaust her. She's doing it without even knowing she's doing it. Yeah. And the bear is standing up to all this stuff. The only reason the bear stops is because, like we were saying, she wakes up and she just goes, no, stop. No, bad. She's like,
bad bear.
You're
no
done.
Bear, bad bear.
Yeah. And then she takes the little bear necklace off. She's like, I don't need to be afraid of you anymore. I don't need to worry about you anymore. And puts the necklace away. And the bear goes away. And I don't feel like that was earned. I don't feel like at any point she learned to cope with anything, because she just found out that she was doing that. She went from just finding out to somehow being able to control it right away.
Agreed. Not only that's at the end of the movie. This whole bear thing is at the end of the movie, and that's when she realizes for sure, without a doubt, kind of like Sam and Roberto, they hurt people when their powers manifested. She killed everybody in her reservation. It was her. They didn't address that at all. I feel at the end of the movie when she would fall down to her knees and break down and cry and just be inconsolable, realizing, oh shit, it wasn't some outside force that was chasing us. It was me. I brought that into existence. And that thought would have broken this character down. But nope. She overcomes this bear, but all of that's going on, there should be a realization for her character. I killed everyone in my village. My family, all my friends, all the people living there. I have destroyed our tribe. And there's no no payoff for that. They don't show her falling down to her knees, breaking down emotionally, losing it because she's finally realized that, oh, that thing, that tornado that supposedly destroyed our village. There was a conversation with her and Dr. Reyes early on. Well, we both know it wasn't a tornado.
Yeah.
As she's trying to work with her, she gives her shoots her up with some drugs to help make her calm and relaxed and whatever. But that realization that I caused the devastation that destroyed my people, there wasn't that. It was, oh, well, I guess we finished this up. There's no force field. Now we get to go be superheroes. Yay! Like that was kind of crap.
Yeah. Yeah. The way they just, it was very good, but they just failed to stick the landing.
Yes.
Because she doesn't reckon with what she did. Where everybody else
there's
is.
no...
That's the whole point of everybody else's evolution through this movie, is that they're dealing with the thing that they did. You know, their first time using their powers, their lack of control, the people that they've hurt, trying to get past it, trying to rejoin society. That's kind of the underlying thing that they're all going for. I mean, Sam even brings it up right when he starts to fight. He's like, well, I got to get better some way, you know, somehow, some way, someday, whatever it is he says.
Yeah.
And he like closes the church doors and runs out to fight. And like you're saying, Danny just goes, you know, okay, I need to not be afraid anymore. I'm bigger than my own fears, which is it's a good moral or a good lesson to have, but it doesn't compare with an hour of all the other characters dealing with the same thing and more naturally coming to their endpoint.
Right. Like every one of the other ones had something that they had to overcome in some way. And Danny's character never did that. There was no really overcoming anything. She just woke up and, all right, well, I'm going to control this bear now.
It was a little bit of a Captain Marvel moment. Like, no, I'm just going to win and go Super Saiyan. Huh. It's not to the same degree, but it's the conclusion that she comes to. I think it's just that they were out of time. They just didn't have any more time to build her up. That's the only thing I can think of, because all the rest of it was done so well. They clearly know how to do it. They just somehow didn't know how to get her to the point where she realizes what she's done, comes to terms with it, and moves past it, all within the runtime of the movie.
I mean, and I get that. I realize how... I remember hearing about the Justice League, that there was a mandate on that movie that it couldn't go over so many minutes. Like, it had to be, like, under 2 hours or under... what it was right around the 2-hour mark. That it couldn't go over so many minutes. And I really don't want Hollywood to do that. I would prefer them to go back to what they used to do in big, long epics like Ben-Hur or Spartacus. Throw an intermission in that bitch. Okay? Give us a chance to just pause it in the theater, get up, go to the bathroom, get some more popcorn and soda, come back, finish up the other half of the movie, because you're taking the time necessary to build up the characters, to make it mean something to the audience. You want to be invested in these characters. That's why we go watch these things. And this movie was about 5 characters coming together, forming this relationship, and every one of them was done really well, except for what could be argued the main character.
Yeah. Yep.
So that was maybe the most disappointing aspect of this movie. Otherwise, as both of us, I think, have said so far, we enjoyed this. We were both surprised by it, better than either one of us expected it to be. And I look forward to seeing what happens in future installments of this, learning about these characters and seeing if it turns into something that I'm actually going to really enjoy, or if they're just going to, go the route of the CW and just make it more teeny bopper and throw little one-liners in there. I'm not looking forward to seeing that happen. I am looking forward to seeing them continue to slow burn and build up characters, and there being development going from point A to point B, and there being meaningful things that happen in between those two.
Yeah. Yeah, and for me, it went from being very, very promising, very, very good, very enjoyable, to being still pretty good, but it's kind of like an origin Marvel movie. You know, the origin ones are never that great because they're having to establish so much at once. And it just kind of felt like that. And it's fine, but it's not great. It didn't live up to the potential it had. But I would say my recommendation is give it a watch. Maybe don't buy it. Maybe rent it. Maybe wait till it's on something that you don't have to pay for. Maybe it'll be on Netflix at some point. But
right, that you're already paying for.
Yeah, I would not say to avoid this or anything. I don't think it's nearly as bad as some other people are saying, just from some of the headlines that I saw.
No, and I think a lot of it could have been there wasn't as much action in this movie as you expect in a superhero movie. But again, we said this isn't just a superhero movie. It's this thriller, this, tension building movie that does a good job trying to introduce these characters, except for the main character. And I felt like I was invested with the 4 kids who were already in this hospital. Not really Danny at the end, because that end wasn't the payoff for anything. There was no growth. There was just, all right, I wake up and I can do this stuff now. Yay! So that wasn't great. But otherwise, the movie was well done. I thought it was worth the watch, even if the ending didn't quite fulfill the way we were hoping that it would.
So your recommendation?
This is a watch. Definitely a watch.
Okay.
Well, all right, folks. Thanks once again for listening to Movie Howl. Hope you enjoyed this one. We'll get another one at you as soon as we can.
And before we go, I do want to say we have a Twitter now, which is @MovieHowl, and an email address, which is moviehowl@gmail.com. So if you have any feedback, requests, if you want these episodes longer, shorter, different in some way, let us know.